regular meeting,
Hey, we got to go back.
June 2023. I'd like to welcome everyone. Everybody get settled in. So could I get a pledge of allegiance led by Mr. Bailey, Commissioner Bailey?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Tony, can we get a roll call?
Here.
Representative Carter?
Here.
Here.
Mr. Claymo?
Present.
Mr. Williams or
Rick Weber.
Leo? Hitch? Here. Mr. Harrell?
Here.
Mr. Harris?
Here.
Mr. O'Neill?
Present.
Mr. Parker? Mr. Rayford?
Here.
Are you here today? DOT?
Here.
Should be here in a few minutes.
We have a quorum.
Before we get started, do we have any public comments? We limit our public comments to 3 minutes. Okay, no public comments. Everybody take a look at the minutes from the last meeting, and do we approve?
I make a motion.
I'll second.
I got a motion for Commissioner Rayford and second by Mr. Weber. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed.
I'm sorry.
All right, our next item is looking at our approval of our financial statements ending May 31st, 2023. Everybody had a chance to take a look at that? Do I have public comments on that? Board comments? Commissioner Harris, motion moving to approve as published. And a second by Commissioner Bailey. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Financial statements are approved. Our next item on our agenda is our administrative budget for 2023 through 2024. Do we have any comments with the board? Have you all had a chance to take a look at that? There's no rush. Look through your binder and welcome. Is there any board discussion on this? Anybody want to talk about our budget?
Those are the only two possible sources of revenue in that budget. That's it?
As of right now, sir, that's what it looks like.
Or borrow and fill material, maybe a little higher than
estimated, but that's a good.
So does anyone want to talk about our budget? Everybody clear?
President Clark, if you want, with this being in there, we can go ahead and strike that, item underneath old business regarding discussion regarding budget analysis or whatnot, what the current annual budget is. That was kind of what I was wanting to get at today. So as long as that's in there, that actually addresses. I just need some time to review it and look at it.
That'll work, that'll work. So,
I don't know if I need to make a motion to do that, but we don't need to discuss it. This is already in there, so.
no, we're good. So you feel like what you're looking at right now with the financial is good? Okay. Thanks, Commissioner O'Neill. We have a motion to approve our budget as it is written.
Make a motion that we.
Motion by Commissioner Bailey and second by Commissioner O'Neill. Any opposition? Hearing none, the budget is adopted. Next item on our agenda is is amendment number 3 for our administrative budget 2022 through 2023. Any public comments on that? Ms. Stoney, if you don't mind, could you please explain why we do it this way? I mean, we have these amendments to our administrative budget. We're just maybe,
Legislative auditor doesn't want us to go 10% over. A lot of advertising for executive director and auditor. I talked to our CPA and we added.
But you didn't exceed 5% of the total budget, it was just 10% on one line item?
It's fine.
Yeah,
We have to change that.
it's just that one line item the auditor recommended? Okay.
We didn't use any money under consultants, so I took it out of there and 1,500 advertising. So the bottom stayed the same.
do I hear a motion to accept our Commissioner Bailey, a motion? Second. Second by Commissioner Harris. Any opposition? Hearing none, it's adopted. Next item on our agenda is a report by the President of ARBC. Really don't have a lot to report. Basically, it was a little unnerving, kind of on the edge of your seat with some of the funding that was once allocated and then not allocated. Talking about Act 170 with the $8 million for our master plan. But we worked closely with our state representatives and senators, and we were able to salvage $4 million back into that. And today we are prepared to sign an intergovernmental agreement for that funding to work with CPRA. And primarily the funding is for our master plan and to do our annual plans and the administration and the contracts that's going to be associated with that. You're probably wondering, $4 million for a master plan. Well, a master plan is important for the ARBC. It becomes kind of like the blueprint, the steering mechanism that can survive all the administrations and the commissioners, and without question, it doesn't have to get reinvented. It just has to get done once it's in place. So I think it's a good thing. Other than that, I would just, with our agenda items, I just want to make a point that sometimes our agenda can get lengthy, and everybody here is volunteers. Nobody's getting paid. And I think we need to be respectful of other people's time. And if there's an agenda item to put on there that's important, certainly we want it on the agenda. And if there's not enough room on the docket, if we have a full docket, we can move it to the next meeting. And also, too, let's, be aware that we don't want to have our discussions just continue on, because certainly it's important topics, but at some point we have to, move on and wrap it up. So just keep that in mind, and we're going to work and try to get everybody out at a reasonable time and still accomplish the goals and objectives for the ARBC board. Other than that, does anybody have any public comments or discussion about that? Okay, moving on to the next item.
Yes, report by legal counsel.
Report by our legal counsel.
Couple of updates, and they're in your packet, but item status of MOU or MOA with CPRA and DOTD. After some discussions with CPRA, they do not believe it's necessary after you read the language of the intergovernmental agreement for the use of consultants. So that particular aspect of a document, it does not appear to be, it's going to be required. In your packet, there is, just be aware, initially we received the intergovernmental agreement, which was set forth per resolution. In that particular case, it was originally at $8 million, thanks to the quick work of CPRA. We have got the new resolution, or the new intergovernmental agreement, which President Clark has signed today, and it has been previously signed by CPRA, so that'll obligate those funds for us before the July 1 new fiscal year. So that particular aspect has been completed, and we will be getting a copy of the final agreement sent out to all the board members once we get it back from CPRA. In your packet, there is a report that I prepared concerning the 2023 legislative session. The initial House committee amendments reduced our $8 million down to $100,000. President Clark reached out to Senator White and the Senate Finance Committee, and ultimately the language was amended in the conference committee report, and in your report you'll see on page 88 of the HB 560, which is referred to as a supplemental appropriation bill. It restored $4 million back to our account. Also, just for your edification, in the capital outlay bill, which is HB 2, there are two projects that are listed there: the Comite River Diversion Planning and Right-of-Way and Utilities, which is a little over $1 million, and there is also the Amite River Diversion Canal Weir Planning and Construction, which is listed at $5 million, correct, Mr. Harrell?
Yes, but it's a
No-go. In reference also, there is also, in East Baton Rouge Parish, there is the flood risk reduction project, and also there is a drainage project in Baker that it may be of interest to the board members. Also, I previously reported to you House Bill 460 by Mincy, which this was involving the issue concerning the Department of Transportation and Development. 406, I say 460, 406, in which there was issues with the I-12 corridor and produced a report by October 1st of 2023. That particular bill is enrolled. Also, House Bill 514 by Mincy. This bill was involving, and I think we talked about it previously, was to allow for the alternative use of drainage tax collected for the Comite Diversion Canal. That bill failed and did not pass the full House. Also, House Bill 409, Representative Edmonds. This was relative to the stormwater utility fee authorization that was passed by Representative Zarang last year, and this particular aspect of it would require a vote of the people to adopt a utility fee. And also House Bill 465 by Representative Hodges. This would exempt Livingston Parish from the provisions of the Scenic River Act. I think there was a determination that because of changes that were going on with the state, that particular necessity of having that exemption take place was no longer, and that bill was withdrawn by the author, Representative Hodges. Also, there was Senate Bill 42. This bill was involving what I would refer to as the establishment by statute of the Watershed Management Council. That particular bill passed the Senate, passed House committee, and was subject to call for final passage in the House, and the bill in that particular case was never voted on by the full House. And those were bills, I think, that were of interest to the Commission. Also, I think we have provided to you some draft consideration of rules involving procurement, and there's a lot of flexibility for this Commission. I don't believe that there needs to be any action taken on this particular time, but I'd ask for those you are interested. I also provided a set of guidelines for the adoption of professional service contracts, as well as a sample that I drafted up of a RFQ, a request for qualifications. So that's kind of an overview as far as what's been going on legislature and the direction to come up with a set of policies and procedures. And I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody may have. As you recall, last year's act had $8 million, and the $8 million passes through CPRA. This particular amendment to the supplemental appropriation bill keeps the same flow through CPRA to ARBC, but it was just a reduced amount from 8 million. I would like to say it a better way. It went from 100,000 to 4 million. That would be a better way to kind of.
Well, that's the politically correct way, but
But that's not what happened.
8 million, and they screwed us out of 4 million. So let's just be honest.
Yeah.
Well, we are. I think when you got the conference report, it did not come out of the Senate Finance Committee and the amendments that were provided in Senate Finance with any money.
Right.
So in conference, this decision was made.
Right, and it's for the master plan?
It is for the development of the annual and master plan.
Both of them? Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm not sure. I don't know if this thing's on or not. I think it would be important, from what I understand and working through the legislature, one of the comments is that we hadn't spent the $8 million. And I mean, reasonably, of course we didn't. We had just started the reformation of this board and taking action, so obviously we weren't ready. But I would like to put an agenda item on the next meeting to start to analyze the $4 million, to specifically spell out what we need to spend that on so that we can lock this into contracts and start taking action over the next 9 months of this $4 million, so that we can show, hey, we got this money in movement, it's under contract, we're spending it for the benefits of the Amite River Basin. And so I would like to start analyzing exactly where that $4 million is going to go and start putting that into some kind of plan, not just for the master plan. If we're going to spend it on anything else, let's have that discussion. I mean, I'm not sure if we're going to spend the $4 million just for a master and an annual. I'm not sure. Seems like a lot to me, but nonetheless, let's start having that conversation of how we're going to dedicate that money. So when we go to the legislature next year, we can say, hey, this is what we spend and this is what we'd like to ask for, because we haven't quite either reached our objectives or we have. Either way. Thank you.
Larry, can we spend it on anything besides the master plan and the annual plan? Commissioner Quintmall, he was saying that we might be able to spend it on some other stuff. I mean,
it is restricted to those items, but working with the CPRA, we put some language in the intergovernmental agreement that said, to the extent that staff, executive director, myself, working on that particular aspect, that those could be reimbursables out of that. So to the extent that some of the staff dedicates its time to working on the annual plan or the master plan, that there is some ability for us to receive, and I kind of goes to your question, but until we had that in place, we didn't really have the ability. But working with CPRA, they understand, but it'd be like any type of reimbursable, that would have to be presented, and that information had to be recovered by timesheets or whatever by the executive director. But being able to spend it on anything, that funds are restricted.
So, yeah, if I can comment one more time based on that. So I would like to analyze that, because I think if we can get a program manager, which is within a company, to do modeling and other things that we need to do to move forward into projects, correct? Because the biggest complaint about this board was we didn't take any action. All we did was plan. I want to try to get away from planning and start taking action in projects that actually benefit people. So I want to analyze what we can spend that $4 million on, not above and beyond. If it's going to be towards that master plan, well, if projects are going to be in that master plan, what else can we spend in hiring companies to help assist in that? And I'd like to have that spelled out, on the legal side of things, so that we have footing when we go for those reimbursements.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The fiduciary agent on this, are we going through the Department of Treasury, or are we going through Facility Planning and Control? Do we know who we dealing with yet?
CPRA.
CPRA, directly with CPRA? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Not the treasurer.
All right.
Commissioner Haas.
Am I on? So, yeah, I think I just wanted to add, and I mentioned this in the last meeting, but having that agreement signed does create the bona fide obligation for those funds. So they can't be swept, basically. So they're there. But I couldn't agree with Commissioner Comont more. I think it is important that at the next meeting we have an idea of what a roadmap might look like in terms of getting those dollars executed and getting a plan done and or projects on the ground. The easiest way to go to the legislature and ask for more funds, right, is to be able to show some successes, and we got to show some successes to be able to do that. So I just wanted to second that notion and make sure everybody understood that money is there. It's not going anywhere at this point in time. Thanks.
Any more comments? Real quick, Larry, quick, if there's possible, could you talk about House Bill or Senate Bill 42 and what that meant if that would have passed, and if it does pass, as opposed to not passing?
Okay. As many of you are aware, Governor Edwards, by executive order, created the Watershed Council. In that Watershed Council, he created, as you recall, 8 different councils in sub-districts. We were originally, the Amite was originally in 8 as a result of some actions, but seven. As a result of some actions taken, we were able to establish our own. So there is a steering, for all the other watersheds, there are steering committees made up of appointments. We are, in fact, been designated by the council as the, in effect, steering committee for our watershed, and the watershed now is only the Amite River. Whoever is the next governor will make a determination whether to continue the executive order, and unless they take some specific action, that executive order will stay the same. But the attempt by Senator Mills was to codify statutorily as law. It did not pass. It did not pass the House. It easily passed the Senate, but when it got to the House, it was at the end, no action was finally taken on that. So what will happen in the future, come the fact that we'll have a new governor, no one can predict what will happen, whether he will or she will continue the present executive order or reform it in some manner or even do away with it. So I doubt it would be done away with because of the fact that in the discussions and work with HUD on the money that has been coming in, there are certain requirements that HUD is imposing. So I think there's going to be some form of a watershed council, but to what degree, it would be hard to predict.
Thank you, Larry. Any public comments or discussion? All right, appreciate it, Mr. Bankston. So moving on to under old business on our agenda. Talk about an update on advertisement for auditor for FY 2022 through 2023. Tony, did you have an update on that?
I provided it in your package. The executive director's position, are we doing the auditor or the executive director's position?
This is, I think it says auditor first.
Okay, auditor. On May 19th, I went ahead and sent out 32 approved legislative auditors. They were sent the advertisement through the mail. It was also posted in the Advocate on May 23rd and 30th, and we have it also posted on our ARBC website. I haven't received any yet. I was told from our previous auditor that there is one firm that is contacting him and if they're interested. But the deadline is June 30th, and I haven't received any yet.
So what about the previous auditor?
He's retired. He's retiring.
Got you.
Is my understanding that we can hire whoever we want? Is that correct, Larry? I mean, we did everything we were supposed to do?
Yep.
And that if it comes down to where no one's interested, we could reach out to some firms and see if they would be interested. And we could hire whoever that y'all want to hire.
And I'm sorry, we have until when to do this?
Well, they have until June 30th. So at our next meeting in July, we might need to make a decision.
we have to have a auditor in place by August.
August, yeah.
So the next
Next
meeting.
meeting. July 18th is our next meeting.
3 year.
Most of the time it's 3, yeah. As far as the executive director's position, we had it in the Advocate on June 5th and June 12th. The Advocate online is where we're getting a lot of our resumes from. And the Civil Service website since June 9th, we have it on the Louisiana Engineering Society's website, ARBC's website, and we have it posted on LinkedIn. We've received, as of yesterday, around 47 resumes. And they have till July the 14th to submit.
Commissioner Quintmall, did you have a comment or you want to discuss something?
I did. I was just, so I'm going to go ahead and reach out to some auditors that I know. I would express to my colleagues if they can do the same. Most of our government entities know particular auditors. So I'm going to do that this afternoon, and if I can encourage some of my colleagues to do as well. So maybe we can get a little more traction if they hear from us directly, and we can kind of explain to them the importance of this board and so on and so forth. So I plan to see if we can get us one. I'll do my best. All right, thank you.
Just to confirm, we have to have it in place by August 1st? 8/1?
Okay. So Tony, that was pretty good with the number of resumes, applicants that we've,
Yeah, they're coming in like
47?
now they're coming in 5, 6 a day, so.
so if you had a chance to look at them, are they all over the place? Are they hitting the mark or what?
They're all over the place,
Oh.
but we do have a few.
Okay.
There's a couple that looks interesting, yeah.
we'll have to wait.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when
Commissioner
do you think we'll be able to get the resumes for us to kind of maybe look at in general?
Necessarily want to, go ahead.
You know, perhaps we could set up a committee to one, cull out what is not in the ballpark.
There's a lot that needs to be done.
So based on your expression, Tony, I mean, it's all over the place?
Yes, and we definitely
Okay.
need to weed them out.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Commissioner Quinmall?
Sir.
So we do have a committee in place already for the executive. Gary heads it. So we will call out to make sure that the ones that don't meet the requirements, we can slash those. And then maybe we'll discuss how we narrow that down for a full board to analyze that. So yes, we have a committee. We'll,
All right, Commissioner Quinmall, my apologies. Is that the same committee that
we had an executive search committee, did we not?
It's the committee that we created to create the executive director job title and whatnot.
Okay, and that was it?
I mean, it's
Okay.
executive director.
Okay, so that, I mean, we're going to have to clarify that. So to create a job title versus actually going through and choosing who's going to be the executive director may be a little different task. So
Yeah,
we'll discuss that.
You can either choose to reauthorize the existing committee to do that or create a new one, either way.
Commissioner Harrell?
I think we should have Ms. Tony send everyone all the resumes and let each commissioner go through them and submit the ones that they like the best, and then those go to the committee to narrow it back down a little bit more. That's just my suggestion.
Seconded.
That's good.
Commissioner Bailey, you have an idea?
Yes, I can appreciate what you said about sending the resume to everybody, but it's a lengthy process. And the three of us have gotten some of those resumes, and they're all over the place, I think it'd be best that the executive committee, the three of us, find the ones that are in line with the requirements and send those to the commissioners and go from there.
I have received all resumes, and I have read them. Okay.
That's fine.
And yes, I was just pumping, but I have read them, and they are all over the place. Personally, they may be less than a half a dozen that are in the ballpark. More like 4.
4. That's right. 4.
Approaching half a dozen.
So what we can do is, based on that, Jack, call out all of that and get the ones that are in the ballpark
Yes.
and provide them to the entire board
That's what we need to do.
and go from there.
Yes.
Fred, you got a comment?
No, sir.
Yes, you do.
Why, you can tell by my face? Yeah.
I've worked with you for a while. Come on.
No, that's
So-
fine. I mean, I guess my point is as a commissioner, I'd like to see the application. I realize no matter, when you look at the job descriptions and stuff, it's going to be all over the place. Everybody's interpretation of what they have is different, and there's no question. All I wanted to do is just so somebody would ask me, say, I applied for that job. Well, I'd say, yes, I saw the resume. You know, well, I may not have to necessarily agree with it, but I don't have a problem, and I'm going to call them down. I know that's not possible, and I would rather give to this group, say, here's my 5 or 6, or maybe the same 4 that you're looking at, but I'd at least like to have that opportunity.
I don't think we have a problem with that. Commissioner Harris, you?
I agree with that, and I think it really brings to light what kind of applicant, what's out there. I mean, ranging from the manager at the Sunglass Hut to a retired educator with no experience whatsoever. That's what Lionel was talking about. We can weed those out. But
Very
you
quickly,
can- but go
very
ahead,
quickly.
and
But
so
I'd at
can
least
you
like to
as
see
soon as
that.
you
That's
see
all.
them. But there's some, because there's some of people that you know personally that have applied, so you're going to be
I've
definitely.
had at least 12 have called me, said, I've applied and I want the job. I said, great, but you better be qualified. So
No, we can send them all.
So Tony, you're good with, if Tony's okay with this, forwarding these?
All of them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, no problem. Y'all be aware, though, you'll be getting them. Like, do you want them in batches or once a week, or
I would suggest batches, like one email.
like a whole day or 2 days? Just, okay, I'll do that.
So one of the things we could do is we could actually create a OneDrive or a Dropbox file and drop them all there, and then give all the commissioners access to that folder, and then
Yes.
it's on them.
That makes sense.
I'd also like to say
That makes sense.
I would love to get the executive committee's thoughts on who their top 4 or 5 are, just like I would like to get the entire commission's thoughts on who their top 4 or 5 are. I definitely don't not want your feedback or your interest saying, hey, look, out of these 47, I like these 4, or I like these 3. I'm all about y'all's feedback, but I think I want to echo Commissioner Rayford, Commissioner Harrell, and some others. I'd like to see the entire cornucopia of applicants, so to speak, even the folks that work at Sunglasses Hut. So.
I can tell you, after you look through these 47 applicants, you're going to see probably 4.
Well, and they're,
Politically speaking, I just think we should all look at everyone.
that's my role as a commissioner.
Ms. Tony, I can work with you, or we can figure something out to get some.
This is gonna, but yeah, either way, yeah.
I'd like to make a motion that Commissioner O'Neill set that Dropbox up.
Point of order, I'd like to create a counter motion to,
Counter motion.
Yeah, and make sure everybody has access and it's clear and apparent how to get there and do it. And when you do it, it works.
Okay.
All right. Any more discussions? I think we got an idea about the resumes and what we're going to do. I'm looking here. Did we talk about our RFQ, RFP?
We did.
Okay.
Well, I would hope that the commission would be ready next month after reviewing it to adopt some kind of formal.
So Larry, in our packet, you have prepared a draft contract that kind of synthesizes and puts all this, what we're talking about.
Set of rules.
Okay.
Similar to the rules that you would see for the state, but a state agency, there is a process of approvals of contracts that goes back to the Office of Contract Review. That's not appropriate for us. We don't need that process. The other thing in reference to an RFQ, there's really no specific laws in reference to an RFQ. So I have taken some examples of other RFQs that have been used by a state agency or a governmental body that provides kind of a general overview of what an RFQ can do. A lot of flexibility in all of that, and also I prepared, working off of what the state has done, eliminating the information concerning Office of Contract Review into a set of guidelines that anyone should be able to take and see what is required in a contract, what are the requirements of how we process this, how you score. All of that is in the information that I provided to you.
Any more discussion? Commissioner O'Neill?
I would just say I've looked through a good bit of what Mr. Leary's put together so far, and having reviewed that on a daily basis to go and sing for my supper and do work as a consultant, it looks fair. It looks really close to what we would need if we were going to go out for professional services via RFP or RFQ. So I don't think we're far away at all.
One more, if I could. I apologize, I hadn't looked at it in advance, but does it cover most of the CFRs that we're dealing with grants? Does it have stipulations for that?
It makes sure that Mr. O'Neill gave me the information that's required by whether FEMA or GOSEP. I've tried to include to make sure that if we're going after money and it's federal money, that we'll meet the requirements for the federal money also. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Any public comments? All right, moving on to our next agenda item, update on legislative funding status. Do we have anything on that?
I put that on the agenda, but I mean, to be honest with you, in the attorney's report, I mean, we basically covered a lot of those agenda items. So I wanted to make sure those things were covered, but Mr. Leary covered a majority of them during that. So thank you, Mr. Leary.
Okay, next item on the agenda.
I have one.
Excuse me.
So I think that we need to prepare a ask for the end of this year for the next legislative session. So we have to get those asked in. So at some point in time, we have to have the discussions of what we're going to be asking the legislature to do for ARBC in 2024. You should have those typically for November, December.
November the 1st.
So November the 1st, as Representative Carter says. So we need to start having some process and planning for next year, since we're already in June and July will be upon us soon. So we need to create an item on the agenda, or we need to create a committee to start looking at the legislative component of what our ask is, get to know the legislative members, get to keep update on what committees they sit on, so on and so forth, so that we can provide or proceed in a very efficient manner.
Mr. Chair, who handles the committee's e-court submittals? Who does that?
Say it again?
The e-court submittal for capital outlay, who does that for the committee, that when they submit our request?
Well, we haven't been in existence that long, and prior to our existence, I don't know that anyone done it. So this is kind of new for us. This would be the first time for the new organized ARBC.
Well, what Mr. Quinmore just mentioned, we may want to identify who's going to be doing that both at the same time, so we can get.
I'm just talking off the top of my head. I would think it would be somebody, that involves Larry, Mr. Bankston, our legal counsel, but with a consensus from the board on exactly what we want to go with.
Okay.
Mr. Clark, one comment.
Commissioner Quinmore.
We also need to discuss the possibility of hiring a lobbyist for ARBC.
We can't have one.
We do.
We can't have a lobbyist.
You don't call them that.
Okay. Whatever we need to call them to help on the floor. I mean, if we can't have one, that's fine, but I mean, I don't know, we probably going to need some help somewhere, whatever you might want to call that person.
The only restriction that you have is that you can provide information, you can't, and you can suggest, but yes, you can have someone acting as a governmental relations. No question about that.
All right, our next item on the agenda is,
Well, let me just say, historically, I have always registered as a lobbyist, and it's technically okay, for ARBC in past legislative sessions. So I'm listed as one, so just I wanted y'all to be aware of that.
any more discussion? Any public comments? Okay, next item on our agenda is discussion regarding annual performance review. Is there any board discussion on that?
Just wanted to throw that out there. I think at our last meeting, we had some discussion regarding how we go about pay raises, things like that. I think it would behoove us if we decided to go ahead and put some type of annual review process in place or some type of performance review process in place so we could go about that the right way and have our employees, whether it's an executive director, whether it's Ms. Tony herself, have something they can understand and be aware of on an annual basis. That process is going to happen. I think it's just, as we grow up, I think it's part of the things, one of the things we need to have in place. So I didn't know necessarily who would be in charge of that. I'm not trying to have Mr. Harrell make another motion to have another committee created for Mr. O'Neill to chair, but no, I do think it's something that we probably need to explore as we grow and we grow up.
So when you suggest maybe we have something like that in place, like within a year or this month or later down the line, but eventually?
So
Okay.
if I may.
Commissioner, come on, please.
Anytime you're dealing with public funds, taxes, we have to make sure we have processes and policies in place. If we don't and we give raises without that, we could be attacked, and that's just any time you deal with public funds. So we need policies and procedures in place to be able to give raises, what those restrictions are, just like any HR department would for any governmental entity. So we need to establish that process. It's very important so that when auditors or anyone starts looking at how we do things, yes, there's a policy in place, it's been reviewed by legal, and this is what it is. It's just anytime you deal with public taxes, you know, you got to be careful. You just can't do these things willy-nilly like that.
Any more discussions on that?
It needs to be done.
Whether you are given a,
So I'm just curious. I mean, I'm kind of new to this game, to the ARBC. I mean, was there something that y'all used before? Or it was just kind of,
Well,
you just make it up as you went?
there was a long period of time which Tony did not receive any raises.
8 years I went without
8
one.
years. That was mainly because of the fact there was pending litigation, and she just felt she didn't want to be involved in having a complaint about that. And so the same thing was Mr. Reachier. He did not receive a raise for a long period of time. So raises, there was no performance evaluation being done at that particular time, no.
Commissioner Harrell.
I'd just like to say, if you have a process set up, whether you give someone a raise or not, you may just reward them other ways if the funding's not available to give a raise. But I do agree we need to have something in writing so the employees know what to expect when their evaluation comes up.
To create a policy for that, I pretty much did the others that we have to have in place for the legislative auditor, but it would be no problem to create a policy, and we already have a form that's created for doing the evaluation.
Excellent.
Used by
Commissioner
other
Quinmore, you
boards.
got a comment?
Yeah, so in that policy, you put in things like COLAs, which is a cost of living adjustment. Our employees here at ARBC should have the same right as all the other government entities that receive these COLAs on a regular basis. So these are the things that we can put in place, so actually her living wage can keep up with inflation and things like that. So this is the reasons why it's important. And so, of course, we'll vote on that every year, but nonetheless, at least we'll have a process in place for it. And that way, if you merit raises, you're going to have that in the policy as well, and what dictates that, and so we can proceed in an orderly fashion. Thank you.
Commissioner Weber.
Again, because I'm new, I don't know, do we have policy letters for HR or procurement or whatever that folds up into a policy manual? Is that how it's designed yet? So I haven't seen any of that.
There is a policy, there is a manual that has been adopted by ARBC some time ago, and it does have some aspect of evaluation, but probably not to the level that it really needs to be.
Correct.
So would you recommend that the chair sign off on that we adopt the policy manual for the board?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And if you'd like, I'd get to work on getting a draft, working on what Ascension, Livingston, East Baton Rouge Parish does, and try to not to reinvent the wheel.
That would kind of be the blueprint of how
Yes, sir.
this should operate, if we could get the manual. Okay.
Commissioner Carter, you got a question?
Yeah, I got a question. I'm new to the board and I don't know, but do our employees qualify for state retirement and state benefits?
Yes, sir.
All right. I didn't know if we did or not.
Members, they're eligible for laser and state group insurance.
All right. I didn't know. Thank you.
Any more discussion? Public comments? Okay, moving on, our next item. Process, policy, procedure, budget analysis discussion. What is ARBC's current annual budget? Commissioner Quinmore, O'Neill, did you have a
I don't know if, I'm actually, what I'd like to do is look through Larry's documentation that he included in the most recent amended budget. I think that should probably answer everything, but we just had basic questions about what we could and couldn't afford, really from an executive director perspective, but I think the paperwork that was included in this month's packet should give us a much clearer picture. I just need some time to kind of review it. So again, didn't want to belabor anything, just wanted to make sure we got those questions answered for me.
So just to follow up with O'Neill, so as we take the $4 million on and we start budgeting and analysis, we need to look at our current budget and see how that fits into what our overall goals are, so that we can budget for those goals. And I think that's the point, is starting to do that analysis. And that's kind of why we brought it on here. Okay, do we have any money for match money that we can match to our project for a grant? Are we going to put money towards a grant services to write grants for ARBC? What are the mechanisms in place for us to achieve the goals that we have set out for ourselves? Because if you don't tie it to the budget, you're not going to achieve it. And so I think it's important for us to start analyzing the existing budget as well as future income money, so that we can see how do we achieve our goals as a board. And that was the point. None of that has to be decided today. It's just something we need to start working on in the future, so we can tie things to the budget to see what we're capable of doing and what we're restricted because we financially can't afford it. And I think that was the purpose. Thank you.
Any more comments? All right, thank you all. Moving on to our next item is discussion of our next meeting location. I think our up for rotation is East Baton Rouge.
Yes.
We have met at the Water Institute in the past, that qualified, and it's very inspiring. It's a good neutral meeting ground. However, it comes with a cost. And for a board that has uncertainty in our budget and limitations on sources of funding, I don't know if EBR is able to accommodate our meeting, but
Commissioner, I am looking into that right now. Quite frankly, the only problem I have, we have a council chamber just like this that would work very easily, but parking is a nightmare, and just getting everything set up the way that would need to be. If not, I'm gonna double check this week with, see if we can get over there at the legislature and get one of their conference rooms to see if we can work that out. As I understand, talking to Tony, she indicated that the capabilities that we need is there, and I have a few people we can call to see it. I'll get that resolved this week.
you know, when we first started to have our first meetings, we went down that path. And there were a lot of places, a lot of venues in East Baton Rouge that would provide a venue and accommodations for our meetings. It's just, you know, we want to make sure everybody's comfortable, whether it's walking or it's big enough or live streaming, those type things. So if this don't work out, we could perhaps, another option is look at the Capitol, like we did before. Now that session is over, perhaps. And now we've been working together. We've had a couple meetings. I think we feel pretty good about each other. We could go to the Capitol.
We only have one problem, that is,
If Robbie's okay with it.
well, the only problem we have is if there is a veto session, that will be July 18th through the 23rd. And if we in a veto session, there won't be any room at the Capitol.
So I never thought about that. That's a good point, though.
So I did want to say one thing. We talked about, I sent y'all some email comms back and forth. The LSU Center for River Studies is right near the Water Institute. Plenty of parking over there, fairly adjacent to it. And I don't think they're going to charge us to actually host it. There's availability. We could fit way more than the folks that are in this room over there. And it's able to be live streamed and handle that kind of thing. And free's always great. So if the Capitol's not available, that's a fairly centrally located place that we've already talked to that said they would be more than happy. And it's also fairly inspirational as well in terms of what they do over there. So,
Tony, didn't you create like a spreadsheet with
I
all
did.
of the different options and accommodations?
That was one of them.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so we might have to get our hands back on that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Tony, would you provide it? Because I don't get but 400,000 pieces of paper from y'all, so I'd like to at least, I know, send me that to me again. I'll see what we can do from there, please.
I just
Okay.
want to know why he only gets that much.
Yeah, multiply that times 3. Hello. So the date, we're good with the date. You know, myself personally, our council meetings are on the third Tuesday of the month. So I have this meeting, and then I got to go back and prep the parish president for the meeting tonight. So it's challenging, but it's doable.
July 18th.
I can call and find out if it costs us any money where Gary's talking them out, and they do live streaming, or they just provide the Wi-Fi.
They have Wi-Fi set up, so we would probably need to do a little bit of tech work over there. But there's no cost. We already talked to them. They said they'd be
Y'all
happy
want
to
to
host us.
just see if they're available and schedule it this time?
I'm
for
sitting
there?
right here buying, so.
Why don't I check on the date, make sure it's available, and if so, I'll report back to President Clark, and if folks are good with that, then I think we can set it.
I'll look at moving it to the third Tuesday. July 18th.
No, 18th, yeah.
All right, we'll move it to the second Tuesday or fourth Tuesday.
So, Bren, how are you with the second Tuesday of the month? Okay.
My boss right there. So I can see if I can get it moved.
I knew there was a reason.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Why don't you just move it, and then I'll get with... I'll just get it moved.
July the 11th.
We're moving the meeting?
Is it okay, we're discussing July the 11th, perhaps? Board discussion, let's hear some comments.
Is there a reason we're moving it from the 18th? Not that I have a conflict.
All right.
Would be, for the future, it'd be the second Tuesday instead of the
To avoid
third
your
Tuesday.
council meetings.
Yeah, I mean, I can do what I got to do, believe me, but it, just as far as accommodating, it does make a day a little less stressful.
And the objective here is to help you out. So if we can move the meeting to the second Tuesday,
But look,
let's just do it.
But I'm compelled to deliver, I don't care
I
who
understand
it's
that.
for.
I understand that. We don't need you under stress.
Just for the board's edification, that third Tuesday is also the date in which the Comite Diversion Canal Committee meets at 10:30. And I've mentioned to some board members that my office, I generally attend that, but if I'm here like it is today, my associate attends and keeps notes and
So we double
reports
pay.
back. So you have some other items going on, and that's DOTD's monthly meeting. And City Parish generally attends that meeting, not necessarily Fred himself,
It
but
sounds like second Tuesday would be better.
Don't believe it, it's the second Tuesday.
that's up to the board. I can handle either way.
Well, if we're doing it on the second Tuesday, it sounds like we could save in attorney fees.
There you go. There you go. Place must be full.
I've got to be at the 8.
Do we need to make a motion to change these going forward, or
Yeah. Did you do that?
I'll make the motion to change the monthly meeting date for the Amite River Basin Commission to the second Tuesday of each month going forward.
And I second.
I got a motion by Commissioner O'Neill and second by Commissioner Bailey. Commissioner Frolito.
Does it have to be in the morning to the Tuesday? Could it be in the afternoon?
I don't see that it
So,
has
yeah,
to,
yeah,
so,
So we have governmental meetings, committee meetings, and things like that in the afternoon, so it'd be very difficult for us to have to address our committee meetings.
Afternoons?
I have actually meetings Tuesday evening, but I can work around prepping for those. I'll just prepare on Monday. So, but I do have meetings on the second Tuesday.
traffic kicks in gear to about
Yeah.
2 o'clock.
This allows us to get out of here, get to lunch, and get back to work.
So is there any opposition to the motion and second? Hearing none. Second Tuesday of the month, 10 o'clock. And Tony, we'll try to get with everyone and confirm our meeting location. Sounds like the Water
Center for River Studies.
Center for River Studies, where they have that nice model. Okay, the next item on our agenda, moving on, is Comite River Diversion Committee, project status. Larry?
It's in your packets.
It's in the
It's
package?
at the back of the packet.
Yeah, this is what is, it's a little distressing. But this is produced, this document, for one, this update is from the Zoom committee meeting that takes place. It is Corps of Engineers, DOTD, East Baton Rouge Parish, and the Amite River Basin Commission. The biggest, and as you would expect, the biggest issue remains to be the Florida Gas final design. You are, in looking at the discussions it is 2 years from the day they start work before the day they'll be finished, in my estimation of having the discussions with this. As a result of there's been some discussions about what they call the Brooks Lake property, and this was initially thought that it would not be necessary, but it now looks like they're going to require some additional parcels that they're still getting. And for the most part, bridge construction, and DOTD is doing a fantastic job of getting the work done. They're using what they call the CMAR, which is kind of a design build, and it's for legislation that was passed a few years ago that allows for more coordination, and as opposed to having engineer put out for bid, contractor, it's all done at one time. So if you look, there is also an attachment from the Corps of Engineers, and they call it comms, but it's just the aspect of work being done, and it shows you the level of how complete the various items are. Some of it they haven't started on, but some of these, because the Florida gas pipeline crosses so many of these comms, you'll never get to 100% until that issue is totally resolved. So the other thing that was discussion in some of these meetings is the level of funding. The numbers have skyrocketed in reference to the amount of money it's going to take, but it appears both the Corps of Engineers, and all other people that are in this meeting on this Zoom committee, is you are finding that you'll have Garrett Grays's office, Senator Kennedy's office, and Senator Cassidy's office all participating on these calls. So they're well aware of the funding issue as well as the status of it. So that's kind of an overview. As you know, the commission itself does not have a role in actual construction or review of any of this, but we do participate and keep an update of what's going on.
Thank you. Any comments?
Is there a reconciliation of, have we asked for that, or is that already available?
We've asked for it. The congressman has asked for it. Other people have asked for it, but we have not seen a reconciliation of, they're working on it, they say, but they're not finished with it, they've told us.
So they doubled the price but didn't say why?
Well, yes. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, is there a new completion date?
Completion date?
Well, we can actually, if there's a flood, we can open it up. I mean, that's what I want to know.
Well, I mean, it's not constructed, and it's not.
Is there a day when we,
the funding,
in the future, that we can say it's going to be open?
Well, it's a lot of uncertainty considering the cost has been doubled, and that the cost that was there is the extra part is kind of uncertain where that's going to come from.
Representative Carter, until the Florida gas pipeline has been relocated, you could have you can't, it crosses in two different areas. It kind of, so that has to be totally done before they can complete the work. So it's at least 2 years from now.
Minimum.
At least minimum,
yes.
And the Department of Transportation and Development and the Corps were at the whim of FERC, and until FERC allowed the approval of some of this, and that's still, they had to have a public comment. There's some bunch of federal laws that require certain things done. So the time process has still not started for anything any dirt being turned to move that pipeline.
Thank you.
I was just thinking that the pipeline people, Florida Gas, have to answer to somebody. It sounds like FERC, and that might be the president.
That's correct.
Any more discussion? All right, moving on under new business. Commissioner Harrell.
Sir, I hate to say, but I'm going to have to scoot out of here in just a few minutes for another meeting.
Yep.
But I would like to add something to the agenda real quick, just throw it out so everybody knows what's on my mind. Would you allow that, please?
Yes, sir, absolutely.
All right, folks, I'm sure all of y'all are aware of the dysfunctional aspect of LWI. I don't understand what takes so long to get projects approved, and I don't understand how they look at applications or pre-applications and make decisions on it. I'm hearing some of the last stuff that we sent in didn't have a positive favor to it. So with that being said, I would like to ask all of the parish representatives that's in this region to come together and let's file a mandamus and let's go to court and see what the judge says on it. I think that this region is being overlooked. We didn't receive the $800,000 to move forward with the LWI. I think some of our projects are not looking good. And this funding was for the parishes in this region. Let's face it. We're the ones that were flooded the most in 2016, and I think it was the 10 heaviest impacted parishes should be getting funding, and I don't think we're getting our fair share. So if all of you parish representatives would think about it, and let's join and follow them mandamus and see where we can go with it.
Can we not,
Comments, Commissioner
can we not
Harris?
do that through ARBC, or is it joining in with that?
ARBC could join in. I'm sure anybody can join in, but I think the parishes that's being slighted need to get involved, and let's move forward.
Commissioner Quintmall, you have a comment.
So it's actually on our agenda. It's under new business, LWI round 2. So we're just, that is the next item. So we are in the parameter of the agenda. With that being said, there's a lot of concern about the allocations of the dollars that were got for the 2016 major storm or major flood. So when you look at the 10 most impacted parishes, obviously there's EBR, Ascension, and Livingston rank in if not the top 3, the top 4. This is what the money was received for. I think a lot of us who follow this closely are deeply concerned with where this is headed with LMI, which is low to moderate income. And I want to stress that is a political category. Floodwaters know no income. They know no race. They know no religion. They just flood people. And we are not spending money to solve the problems of 2016. That was what the money was gotten at. That's what it was sent down to do. And when you look at what the true solutions are, were from me following, and listen, I would like to have a meeting with the governor and the governor's staff. Maybe we don't have all the information, but I can tell you that these next rounds of funding are crucial to solving the problem, not just putting money out there through political categories, because that's what round 2 does, in my opinion, and that's my opinion, okay? Because I know that floodwaters don't care if you're rich or poor. They just don't. But that's what category round 2 is. okay? And it doesn't solve the problems. LWI was supposed to be regional. And when you start breaking off in political categories, it's not regional. It's specific. And we're deeply concerned that the people of 2016 that practically destroyed a lot of their lives, took their most important asset from them and turned their lives upside down, have yet to see anything that will prevent that from happening again. And I share in Mr. Harold's concern, because I think that we all feel it, and there's no one solution. And I think there's a lot of talk like these parish officials all agree that this is the solution. That is not true. And I would like to have some meetings with whoever's making these decisions, because I don't think they're getting the right information. But this is the time. This is the time we finally tell the people who suffered in 2016, we're doing something to help you. Because it has happened, it has not happened yet.
Amen.
And so whatever's necessary, I believe we need to do, and we owe it to the people that their lives were destroyed in 2016, all up and down the Amite River Basin, to ensure that money is spent for credible solutions and multiple solutions. Not one solution, not a political solution, but a solution that prevents people from flooding. And I know I'm on board. I encourage everybody else to get on board, because nothing will happen unless we speak up, because nothing has. History has proven that. And we got to speak up, and we got to start demanding progress, or it will never happen. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Weber.
Supports that. I guess one of my concern is the process in which we select it. How do we engage with that? If we can be more engaged with how do we do it and look at it from an entire watershed perspective to do it as well. But St. James will support that endeavor.
Thank
you. Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Rayford.
I certainly want to go on record that EBR also supports that. It has always been an issue with me from day one. I do also agree with Clip Monaghan when he made reference to, we have parishes that really suffered a lot of flooding, and that money was directly supposed to be going to the areas that were impacted the most, not to spread it out throughout the entire state of Louisiana. That may be a great idea, but not with the funding that we needed at that point. And I also concur the fact that we don't have one project. I can speak for an EBR that's been let out for work without going through the issues with, not DOTD, but with the environmental review, but also through the watershed group. It is, it's another layer of government that you have to go through, and you still don't get the answers. So we are very supportive of that, and I'm ready to see something happen, because the people in my parish, I don't care where I go to the grocery store, they want to know when we're going to fix the drainage. And now that you got a storm sitting out there coming toward supposedly our way, it's going to get 10 times worse, because they're going to say, what have you done for me lately? So that's all I have. Thank you.
I'd like to add one more thing. Just think about it, but 83% by FEMA's study, 83% of Livingston Parish flooded. We think it was 86%, but let's just say it's 83. And I think Ascension and EBR and Tangipahoa suffered about the same. So it's time to move forward.
I'm not speaking for the parish president of Iberville Parish, but I can tell you, working real close with him, East Iberville Parish, which encompasses St. Gabriel, Spanish Lake area, Bluff Swamp, Bayou Paul Road, Alligator Bayou, wasn't even recognized for flooding during 2016, according to FEMA. Clint, did it flood over there?
Yeah.
And those people are still recovering, and we don't like that. So I got a good feeling that the FEMA didn't recognize it, Watershed Initiative didn't recognize it. Also, too, the west side, Iberville Parish, which is Plaquemine, Bayou Sorrel, Bayou Pigeon, White Castle, Grove State. We had an option, a unique option that doesn't always exist, that we were able to utilize. The Atchafalaya Basin was bone dry. If you're familiar with that area, Grand River and the Bayou Sorrel locks, it's the locks that lets barge traffic that comes in the Port of Baton Rouge through the Intercoastal Canal. They work their way on down and they go through the Bayou Sorrel locks on their way to Morgan City. It's a 90-mile shortcut rather than using the Mississippi River. With the Atchafalaya Basin bone dry, we were able to open up the Bayou Sorrel locks and essentially use that as a floodway diversion. It saved that part of our parish. If that wasn't an option, we would have been just as bad, if not worse, than anybody, because the elevation over there is about 5 feet. So I'm just saying, we've been sitting back taking it and participating and being very optimistic and waiting in line and going through this whole process. We're on 3 watershed regions, Region 5, Region 6, used to be Region 7. Now we're so encouraged about Region 9, but we'd like to get recognized. It always puts us at a defense rather than standing and having a seat at the table. We almost have to kind of come across unlike the character that we'd like to, but because of these situations. So I would imagine that we're going to be joining this lawsuit as well. So,
If I can say thank you to everyone, I'll have our attorney reach out to y'all's attorneys. And I'm sorry, but I have another meeting, so thank y'all so much.
well, thank you for the venue, Commissioner Harrell, and we promise we'll clean up after we leave.
Tony will handle that, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, moving on. Under new business, we're working on an intergovernmental agreement between the ARBC and Ascension Parish to do a drone video of the Comite River Diversion Project. We feel like we get a lot of questions. I have questions. We want to see what it looks like. You might be able to see some on Plank Road. You might be able to see some on Highway 61, but I mean, it's an 11-mile stretch. What's going on? So we felt like a drone video might capture that. I think Commissioner Harris, you had suggested that.
Right.
That, you know, that the public would better appreciate. I mean, we get an onslaught of questions from different groups of people as if, you know, because it's our project, that not more isn't happening, when in fact it is.
Right.
If you could see the extent of it.
In our last meeting, we had support for a public service drone, and we looking for a budget, and that's when Clint came up and said, we have that capability in Ascension. We've seen some of their work. It's first class. I mean, it's as good as anything you can get on the market. So he's offered those services to us, and that's what this interagency agreement is between us and Ascension Parish. There's no charge to it. He sends it out, sends his group out. Commissioner Parker has agreed to be the guide, to take his people to show them exactly, all right, from here to here, and be the guide to do all that. They also do the editing. We'll prepare a script that goes along with it. It's we certainly appreciate the offer. It's first class.
Yeah, Commissioner Quintmall, please.
Yeah, so as Commissioner Harris said, it's free of charge. It's a you know, an intergovernmental agreement So the only thing that will require us to have Ascension 21, because we are supplying it for free. So that is, and then they'll have ARBC, but I want to make the point that this is going to go to the executive committee. Nothing will be released without their full review and edits. So it's not like it's going to be us, Ascension, deciding what's going to be in this. That's not the case. We're just providing a way to do this in a very feasible fashion and for us to be a partner in ARBC and supplying our drone pilot as well as the drone and the equipment to do it, including the editing equipment. But this will be an ARBC product. It will be viewed and reviewed by the executive committee before anything's released, and they will supplement all the additional information to go in the video. So this is an ARBC product, and I want to make sure that everyone knows that.
Thank you, Commissioner Quintmore. I would just like to emphasize this is the beauty of the new board and having the parishes working together as one, that we have resources that we could all bring together. And in this case, Ascension Parish, we were looking at having to put this out for bid, and now we're talking free and first class. Thank you, Quint. Any public comments on this idea to do a drone video? Any more discussion? Can I get a motion to agree?
Make a motion to agree to.
Motion by Commissioner O'Neill and a second by Commissioner Harris. Any opposition? So moved. Okay, our next item is the ARBC Interactive Map Quantum Spatial Incorporated invoice. I think that is something everyone is familiar with. If you're not, shame on you. It's a web-based map that shows the extent of the flooding of 2016 throughout the Amite River Basin. And I got to say, they did a real good job on it. It's very user-friendly, and you can zoom in, and you can really see where the coverage was and the depth of water at that location. So if you haven't looked at it, I encourage you to look at it and take a look at where your house is and see what happened. And if there's any differences, you might send a comment back. But I think in this case, there is an invoice that requires an action item. Do we have a board discussion on this? Anybody got any comments on this, the executive committee?
Yeah, I can comment on it because I was there. This project, even though the final result is an excellent piece of work, but it drug on and on and on. It was scheduled for completion, actually, I think, before I even got on the board. But there was some medical issues that got on, some personal issues that delayed it to some degree. But then once we finally started putting pressure on the contractor, they said, okay, we've got to get this finished. He had already been paid for. From what I understand, there was some of that work that was subcontracted out. We didn't authorize any additional payment. There was nothing brought up, but the project was completed. The invoice in question was submitted to ARBC, which was not for us, and it was submitted back to the contractor that was hired for the overall job, and rightly so, he paid it because he's the one that contracted it. Dietmar never came to us and said, hey, we need to authorize this. This is some additional work. None of that was discussed. So that was an obligation that the contractor had to actually finish the project, which he did, and it's a great piece of work. From what I understand now, they're coming back and saying, look, this is extra $7,500. This is an extra $7,500 that needs to be paid. Will y'all pay it? We never authorized it or never had any discussion about it. So that brings y'all up to date on, and Lionel was there, Ed was there, all three of us have discussed this. Wait a minute, what went on? And that's our recollection, and so now y'all are up to date on what happened back at the day when this $7,500 in question came up. So I don't think that we're obligated to pay that.
Any more board discussion? Any public comment on this? Yes, approach the podium. State your name and your where you from, and you got 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'm Bob Jacobson, PE, and I'm the contractor in question. And Jack is entirely correct in his summary. This was additional work that one of the other team members requested additional funds for to complete the project. Dietmar declined to present that request to the board. There was no way the project could be completed without us asking that entity to do a little bit of extra work in finishing this coding work for us, special scripts that we use. So you are correct, Jack. I undertook that additional asking of this other team member who had a separate contract with the board to do additional work to complete the project. And I did do that at my own risk, and I wanted you guys to be aware of it. And I was hoping, and Dietmar and I talked about this last fall, we were hoping that they were going to write it off, as some of me and my colleagues did a lot of work on the project that we did not ask for reimbursement for. But unfortunately, this separate contractor who I had the contract with for this additional funding did in fact send an invoice, and incorrectly, as you said, sent that invoice to the board. And I told Dietmar and Tony they did not have to pay that because I did contract them for it. And then months ensued. And again, I was hoping that they were just going to write it off. But I finally received an invoice from them in April of this year, 9 months or so after the work was completed. And because I authorized them to do it at risk, at my own risk, I did pay them out of my own pocket for that work. And so I'm just making you aware that there was an additional expense by another team member that I personally absorbed, and I believe it's well within the overall budget of the project scope and budget that we presented to the board when we first started. And Jack is correct, the project did take quite a long time. One of the issues you mentioned, but there were many issues which I'm not going to elaborate on. But I'm glad you recognize the value of the project. Want to make you aware of it. And again, I'm a grown-up and realize, and Jack's in business, most of us are in business, we realize sometimes when we take certain things on at risk, it doesn't always work out the way we would ultimately like. But thank you for considering it very much.
So, excuse me, Mr. Jacobson. So what are you asking? Are you asking us to reconsider paying this invoice for this extra money, you personally?
I'm asking you to recognize it as a project expense, delayed as it has been for some time. It was not received by me till April, so I didn't pay it till April of this year. I'm asking you to recognize it as a project expense, and although there was no authorization for that specific work by me at the time, it was within the project budget. The work was within the scope of the overall project. If you recognize that and find a way to reimburse me for this additional expense, there is no markup on my part. There is no administrative charges from me for handling all of this for you. It is just a straight payment of another team member who for various reasons, Dietmar did not want to present this additional cost for this team member to the board at the time. So I went ahead and directed that work personally. So it's just, if there's a way for you to acknowledge that as a due cost of the project and to pay it, I ask you to pay it. If it's going to be a problem, hey, we'll just move on.
We will definitely look into that. Any board discussion? Commissioner Quintmall.
Yeah, so I say that this is one of the things that we have to pay attention to, because if I were on here and this work was done, well, this would be unacceptable. I don't know what agreements were here prior to me or this new board, but those type of things cannot happen. Okay, you can't have that without authorization from this board, because we are responsible for the financial budget, and these budget items are crucial. I will go along with whatever the board wishes. That being said, this should never happen again, is my point. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to look into this. It's a good product. It's unfortunate that it had to happen this way, but at the end of the day, I think we're all proud of it. And it does the public good, it does us good. So we'll look into it legally. Larry? Commissioner Ferlito.
Was the original contract like lump sum, and he mentions budget, or was it like a cost plus?
Not to exceed.
Okay, so but it still fit within that not to exceed?
Yeah, all of the contractors were professional service firms. All of the contracts were not to exceed time and materials type contracts. The team member in question is another professional service company who prepared special ArcGIS Python scripts. Some of y'all I know are familiar with certain coding requirements that we needed in order to do some of the work to prepare the map. They ran out of money. They would not continue to work without additional funds. Some of us on the team did, but they would not. And their work was crucial, Jack, and that was part of the schedule issue. So, and Dietmar, for various reasons, at the time, with everything else going on, did not want to present the request by this other team member to absorb it for additional costs. And so we were already behind schedule, Jack, as you know, and so in order to expedite it and complete it, I was the project manager. I felt like it was important. I don't think something like this is all that unusual in terms of people sucking it up and doing what it takes to get a project across the finish line. Ideally, in another situation, Dietmar might have felt more comfortable coming to the board and asking for more money for one of the other team members. I wasn't asking for any money for myself, and neither were any of the other firms, because we all, knew where things stood. But this one entity required some additional funding.
I think a question
that's where we were. So not to belabor it any further, again, if there's not a way to handle this, I understand, but did want to present the report.
We got you. I think
We're definitely gonna look into it. Go ahead,
I think
Commissioner
our
Webb.
question was, did this expense exceed the not to exceed cost?
It sounds like it did.
It did, okay.
It most certainly exceeded the authorized contracts that I had, and the request that this firm was asking for was additional funds.
And was it outside?
So I took it at risk as a personal item to
I get you. Was it within the scope or outside the scope of work?
It was within the scope of work. It was within the intent of the scope of work. They weren't authorized to do this additional work.
And would you consider it a change order?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was along the lines of a change order. Dietmar would not present a change order to the board, and we were needing to complete the project work. I took this on as additional at-risk work for my firm to ask this firm to do this. And by the way, I've provided the final product to the board that this firm provided. So it's an after-the-fact change order, correct. It is an after-the-fact change order. So if there is no mechanism to compensate my firm for this after-the-fact change order, which we did at risk, then I understand. Just want to make you aware of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're definitely going to look into it. All right, moving on. Do we have a discussion about LWI Round 2? I think we had a little bit of that earlier, but there are the parishes, different parishes. I know we've submitted projects, ARBC, different.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on that.
We have deadlines, ranking criteria, timelines.
It's confusing when we talk about round 2, because round 2 has some specific parameters on what funds were going to be released, how much, what the criteria was going to be, and this was going to be round 2, and I think it was only $100 million.
That is correct.
For all of round 2. What CPRA had come back from representing the governor's office and said, look, we want to know everything that you've got that's shovel ready that we can move forward with on what your priorities are. So we talk about the list we submitted as far as being round 2. Round 2 was a pittance. It was $100 million out of $1.2 billion. That's one of the things Mark was talking about. That is, and it was divided among the whole state. So what the list that we submitted was, if you look at it under criteria of round two, of course it's not going to be passed. And if OCD, who from my understanding, that's who's holding the money, is going to kick us out because, oh, you don't meet the criteria of round two, that was never meant to be. So it's just, as Mark pointed out, it's just a way to sit there and hold the money and not get anything done. Because the list that we submitted was not under it would never fly under the criteria of round two. It's the stuff for Region 9 that needs to be implemented. So when we talk about round two, I just want to make sure we're not confusing that with the list that we submitted that, from what I understand, got shot down. I haven't heard that officially. Is that in writing or anything?
I haven't.
But I was, from what I understand, it was shot down by OCD. We said, are we going to go to the governor and see about that? I understand we went to the governor, and the governor says it's 5 months. I got 5 months, and I'm not fighting a fight. That was my understanding, and I don't, anybody can correct me if that's not the case. But now we're dead. It looks like we're dead in the water until we get a new governor. And as Clint said earlier, we're trying to move forward. Politics has got us deadlocked here once again. I don't know if among this group, other than what Mark had said, is, hey, let's go to the judge. Let's file a suit. Let's make something happen. Or if we have any influence within this body to try to get something off the dime. The money's there. The projects are there. These are all legitimate. What do we do to move forward, Clint?
Thanks. I think Commissioner O'Neill
I just wanted to point out, and Brendan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what Chip had approached us about was something separate from round two, which would be through what's called state projects and programs, which wouldn't be subject to that $100 million cap that you're talking about, Jack. But I know there's been, I'm definitely, I'm more opaque on it than you are in terms of what's been going on. So, but I just wanted to clarify that $100 million question.
Commissioner Haas, you clarify some of that?
Yeah, so that's correct. And I know it's confusing. There are a lot of things going on with different rounds and different potential opportunities. But yeah, so originally round two was capped, you're right, at $100 million. I think there was a cap on the project values as well at $15 million for those. And the LMI, as Commissioner Cuomo mentioned earlier, was a piece of that as well. So those have been submitted. I'm not intimately familiar with how they're being evaluated and so forth, but I understand that those evaluations are going on right now. So there should be some announcement in the next, several weeks, I would believe, about which of those would be selected or not. What Chip had spoken about with this group previously was just what Commissioner O'Neill mentioned, that there's an opportunity for some state-funded projects that wouldn't go through the evaluations similar to round two that could occur. I can tell you that I would challenge your notion that the governor has said that he doesn't want to expend those funds, that he's only got 5 months left. He is pushing very hard to get some of those funds on the ground. And so I think there will be some follow-up meetings with him and with OCD and some others in the next week or two to try to push as many of those projects through. I don't think every one of the projects that's submitted by this board, though, are going to get selected. There were, several $100 million worth of projects that were put forth. So just know that that's being worked on, and certainly the governor is committed to getting those dollars on the ground. He is.
Good. Like I said, there's nothing in writing on this, so you have to go by almost hearsay, or, well, this person talked to the governor, or this person, what's going on. I'm just trying to reiterate this is what I'm hearing, and was looking for that kind of correction. I was surprised, because that was a 180 from what Chip has said. Look, the governor is committed to spend this money and get these projects underway, and then here to say, well, no, it's too late for that now.
Yeah.
That didn't sound right. So
Well, it's not right, so I appreciate the opportunity to try to correct that. But I will say that I think the perception is that there is a lot more money available at this point in time than there really is. There are a few $100 million, I think, left in the program. So we're not talking about $1 billion, plus dollars anymore. A lot of that money has been obligated already. I agree there's a lot of frustration with the pace with which those obligations have made it to projects on the ground. There's an issue there that needs to be, corrected, but they've been awarded to projects. Much of that funding has already been awarded to projects. So.
Yeah, and that's brings up the disturbing point that Fred made. Here we know this was $1.2 billion that was put into the state because of a direct result of the 2016 flood. And now here we are these years later, and the money's almost gone. We've got nothing to show for it. We don't have any project that is underway. This isn't directed at you, understand? And I'm not asking for you to defend it or rebut it, but that's what we were afraid of when we first started, when that money got put in there, is this is just going to evaporate and there'll be no dirt moved. Here's our last chance. All of these projects we have are actually moving dirt that will make a difference. So if there's any influence we have to get that last, whatever's left in there to make something happen, that's what we need to be pushing on.
Understood.
John?
Yes, Commissioner Quintmall?
Yeah, so I just want to follow up with something you said, Brent. 1.2 billion, and there's only roughly 300 million left for projects. That's huge, okay? I can't tell you and express the magnitude of what has occurred. I want the public to think about it. I want every elected official to think about it. 1.2 billion, and here we are on the cusp, the very end of that, and we're all fighting for every single dollar left. And it is an nth of what was allocated. And 80% of that, if I'm not mistaken, which was in it, was supposed to be spent in the 10 most impacted parishes. And that's why this is so crucial. And I think the miscommunication has allowed our emotions and our fears to be elevated. And I think that is the issue, right? There's meetings going on, and we know they're going on. But here we are knowing that these crucial projects will offset flooding that happened in 2016 are on the table, and they're regional projects actually defined on what they needed to be for LWI. And here we are to do guesswork and hearsay, as Commissioner Harris said, because we don't know. And once these dollars are dedicated, no elected official is going to reverse that decision. So we have to be a part of that decision as it's being made, or then we have to take action. And if we can be a part of that and get out ahead of it and say, listen, what are we doing for the residents that lives were destroyed in 2016 so that it won't happen again? And if there's a project that supports that, then it should be funded. And that should be where the end of this tail money that's left, which is hardly anything of the 1.2 billion, because when you're talking about the projects that we have submitted, the ones that make impact are not $5 to $10 million projects. They're big projects that make a regional impact. That's why they cost so much, because they're big and they make impact and they have positive impact, not minimal, but you got to put up the money. And that's where we need the communication to know what's going on, because we have elevated our emotions and elevated our fears because of the lack of it. And I'm hoping that there will be someone from the state that reaches out to these entities and to ARBC, not the parishes and ARBC, and say, hey, we're hearing you. We're working on, we want to make you part of this decision process, because we want to make sure that the money that was gotten for 2016 has some benefit. And I can only pray that money's allocated to help solve the flooding in 2016 in this region, because it's just going to be a shame if it doesn't. And so I'm hoping someone reaches out to us and starts making us a part of this process rather than us having to fight it on the tail end. Thank you.
Thank you, Quint. I think that I echo that same sentiment. Commissioner O'Neill.
I actually was thinking of what Commissioner Pointmont was saying as he was saying it. Bryn, do you have a suggestion on, as opposed to having somebody reach out to us, do you have a suggestion for us to be able to reach out to someone as ARBC to get involved and become a better advocate as these discussions are ongoing?
Yeah, I do. It starts with OCD and Pat at OCD, and certainly I can facilitate that. I'm happy to do that. I'm hearing the message loud and clear, and I've already written a note to reach out to Pat, right, and make sure that that discussion's had with this board. So it wouldn't hurt to invite him to our next meeting. I don't want to, yeah. So, and we can have that discussion with Pat. He's, the lead administrator of this program and these funds.
So just for the record, we're talking about Pat.
Orbs.
And he is?
He's the director of the Office of Community Development, which is where this funding is sort of pulled down through the state's action plan that enables us to get funding from HUD.
So the funding for 2016 to 1.3 is administered through Pat's program?
It's HUD funding, which comes through from HUD. It comes down to the Office of Community Development, which Pat is the director of.
Mr. Pat Forbes?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Do we need to make a motion to request or to do some outreach to Pat to ask him to appear as an agenda item on?
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion. You just reach out. So moving on our.
Sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, Tony.
Did Miss Kathleen Lunn reach out to you? A couple of days ago, she called. She said she was going to contact you in regard to round 2 and some decisions the board has to make by our July 18th meeting, for our July 18th meeting?
It's very possible that she did. I've been out of pocket this weekend.
You might want to check and reach out to her, because it sounded like something that y'all have to do in the July meeting. But now we moved the July meeting to the 11th, so you might want to contact her and see what this is about.
Yeah.
Some choices y'all have to make, she said, or something like that.
That's no problem. I spend the greater part, more than half of a day at my job dealing with this. And Miss Kathleen. And
She
I
said it's a
don't
deadline.
mind, I will
Yeah.
follow up with Miss
All right.
Kathleen.
Oh, since our meeting is now moved to July 11th, do y'all still want to try to have the meeting at the Water Institute or at the state capitol?
I think the Center for River Studies, we're going to scratch the Water Institute. We're looking for
The other
that
place,
four-letter
yeah.
word, free.
Yes, that's what I meant. Yeah,
350.
Free.
yeah, the free place, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, our last item on the agenda is update on permission to use the ARBC data with new project linking flood resilience to urban reinvestment in Baton Rouge. Does any board members know a little bit about this? They could bring to the table and describe what we're agreeing to?
Okay, so some researchers have, and Bob Jacobson has some knowledge in reference to this, have reached out to ask for some of the data that's being used from the original contracts that we had, so that they may be able to use that. We believe they should be able to use it regardless, but I thought this item should be on the agenda for the board to be aware that some of the data that was developed in this contractual work would be available for this research.
Yes, sir, please.
Bob Jacobson, PE. A great part of the project involved redigitizing the bulk of the streams in the Amite River Basin, the watersheds, and a bunch of other delineation work. In addition, there's data sets related to all the high water marks and data that were used to prepare the map, and a few other things. It might be possible to take that data, which you have, which Tony has, and put it on like a OneDrive or some other site. That way, when you get requests, or automatically people that go to the website could go to a link and say, I want to download the data. But right now, when we turned the information at the conclusion of the project over to Dietmar, he wanted it on a hard drive, and then he wanted requests specifically individually to come to the Basin, and then he would individually share that data and also get them to sign a release form and an agreement to share any information or updates that they would make it. So it's up to you guys to decide how you want to disseminate this information, and whether you want to disseminate it subject to some kind of stipulations like that. So that's kind of where things got left off.
I'm lost. Well, I don't know if anybody else has a question. What is this in reference to? Who are we sharing it with, and to what end are we sharing
Well, the entity that's currently requested it, there have already been previous requests for the data prior to Dietmar leaving that I'd heard about, one being lawsuits related, for example, to the I-12 barrier. The lawyers wanted copies of the data. But I've heard of other folks, HNTB, I believe, wanted copies of the data. I don't know whether they actually ever received it yet.
Never heard again.
Never. Maybe they gave up. I don't know. But there are obviously anybody who's doing work in the basin at some point is going to want to have access to the data sets for individual watersheds, for the redelineation, digitizing of the stream networks. So you want to make the data available in addition to viewing it on the website, which, by the way, Stoka's here with CSRS. His team was the one that actually produced the publishing of it online. But the data itself, I mean, people could come to me and ask for it, but at this point, I think it's so new and more appropriate that they come actually to the agency to get the actual data. So you can make it available however you want on a case-by-case basis, but I think what Larry's asking you for is a procedure as to how you want to do it.
Yeah, Commissioner.
So as a part of LWI, there's a massive modeling effort going on in the entire state. I mean, all your parishes are aware of all that LWI modeling going on in your regions. One of the things, and I think there's some folks in the audience, Mr. Brown and Ms. Leanne's aware of it as well, they're working through something called Museum, which is Model Update, Storage, and Maintenance, which is sort of a policy or process that's going to govern how each of these regions handle those big models, but also that data. I'm thinking when that gets all sorted out, or when it gets ironed out, we could probably potentially use the museum policy that LWI has as a way to control our data requests. Because I think every region's going to have to grapple with how they control their model data, right? I think that could probably be something that would be a model for us, so that we wouldn't necessarily reinvent the wheel. Not that I don't mind you charging time, Mr. Larry, but come up, if we could use that policy once LWI is finished with it, which I think they're on their way to, I think it could probably handle most of the issues or requests for data that would come to ARBC. And that's just a suggestion for the
Mr. Knight, for example, Dewberry's model data on the Amite River, and people that would like to utilize that because it was really good work. How do y'all handle that?
Public records request to DOTD. It's that easy. People make a mistake of asking for all the underlying data.
Yeah.
terabytes for AMA, yeah.
So, yeah, that's a completely different story.
So if you brought your own hard drive, how long does that take?
The public records request is the longest part of the process. That's
Okay.
an emailing process. 2 days. 3.
Okay. Commissioner Quintmore.
So, I mean, this looks like to be an action item, so I would propose a motion that we look into establishing a procedure and looking at a cost associated with that procedure to ARBC, and maybe creating a fee. So I think we have to have some kind of policy in place, and if it's the museum policy, so be it. So the motion is to look into establishing a procedure based on the needs for us to release this data.
So, okay, so museum or museum.
Well, whatever
Yeah,
procedure.
model use,
the action is
storage.
to create a procedure.
Yeah, that's what LWI. I don't know that that's even finished yet.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Okay.
I think it's on its way, but.
We got DOT.
It's not finished yet. It's model use, storage, and maintenance. It's
Yes.
getting close, but they're not done.
Okay.
They also
So we got DOTD that does have a policy that is in place, and does it work?
It's just a public record.
Yeah, so it's public records, and it's public data.
So we have the same situation. So we did modeling in Ascension, and before we release this data to anyone, there has to be a policy procedure, has to be legal disclaimers signed and other things that protect these, our organization, much less this one. So we need to look at that before, because just a public information request, we could get that for a lot of different things. That has to be approved by legal. They have to look and see what needs to be redacted and whether this product is in a format to be released without some form of liability. So all that has to be looked at prior to just adopting a procedure. So that's the meaning of my motion, was to create this procedure, look into it, make sure that all entities are signing off on it before we start to execute that procedure.
Okay, Commissioner,
this information
hold on,
is-
public comments, not quite yet, board discussion. Commissioner Haas, you,
Yeah, all good discussion. I just would point out that we at CPR have some of those policies and procedures in place in a form that relates to, if data is modified or if models are modified and so forth. Our general counsel is here. I don't know if we want to take the time for him to explain any of that, or if I just point out that if perhaps Mr. Bankston and Mr. Peterson can get together, we, again, don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel.
okay. Okay, public comments?
Just to reiterate, these are GIS files. During the course of our work, we would make requests to the parish, to Melissa, and she would get Fred's approval, and she would share GIS files with us. I think she shared similar files from work that they did in Ascension Parish. So these are not models exactly, and I don't know that, what the plan is under the LWI to deal with underlying GIS data sets. Clearly, these guys have the LiDAR data set, and what he referred to is you can just make requests for LiDAR data sets. I don't know, the form, I guess, had maybe a release statement or an acknowledgement on it. I don't know, but it wasn't a very complex issue in terms of, I guess everybody who obtains this information obtains it at risk. And just so you know, it's common practice within the engineering community. Once one engineering firm gets the information, they will often share it with other engineering firms that they're working with. So I don't know how you would control the dissemination from engineer to engineer in the world, but I'm just telling you, at this point, I have not shared the information with anybody. I've asked them to come to you for it.
Okay, thank you, sir. We have a motion on the floor to look at this policy, creating a policy for disseminating some of our data to the public. Do I have a second?
A second.
I got a second. Motion by Commissioner Quintmall and second by Commissioner Harris. All in favor? Okay, motion passes. So here today at the meeting, do we have any general or non-agenda items that need to come out? How about any general public comments? Anything from the public? Hearing none, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
O'Neill? Second by Commissioner Rayford. And we are adjourned.
Never shall get quiet.